You know how I said I'm addicted to tiny jars? Well, I sort of found the smallest bell jar I've ever seen last time I was at the thrift store. And I think with the help of my 3D printer, I might even be able to fit an LED diorama in here. Let's find out. Oh, you know what? That's okay, because I bought all of the tiny jars that they had. I'm Sayer, and this is Witch Cove Crafts. Since I bought way too many of these little things, I think I better come up with a solution to get lights into them that I can easily repeat. That's what a 3D printer is for. I like to use Blender for designing my 3D prints. I'm more of an artist than an engineer, so I've been able to use it for anything I need. And you can't beat free and open source. This is very much going to be a prototype. I have some idea for how I might be able to squeeze a battery into a base for these jars, using magnets and a CMOS battery. I use CMOS batteries because they put out 3 volts, which is a common voltage requirement for a lot of LEDs, and they're still quite thin. And I don't have to add any extra resistors in the circuits to keep things small. Once the basic shape is done, I can slice the file and load it into my printer, and then we just have to wait. A quick clean and cure later, and the base prototype is ready, with a little room to spare for the battery. So I do have a basic idea here. I want to do something a little analog horror inspired, which I'm sure you could tell already by seeing the thumbnail. And I want to try and fit a little streetlight scene underneath this jar. Maybe the corner of a neighborhood intersection in Tokyo or somewhere. So our light is gonna need to be a street lamp. I can scratch build a street lamp pretty easily out of bits of brass tubing from K&S Precision Metals. Check your local hobby store, they're usually only a couple of bucks and you can make all sorts of things out of these packs. After checking the size, I can cut it down and then feed a cable through. The printed hole on the base is specifically to give me room to work with the magnets, so I'll cut an extra hole for the lamp post, tap it through, and glue it in place. And then accidentally glue the wire in place too, so I can cut another one, push this one through, and this time glue it in place to the base before feeding through the wire. A piece of square tubing glued to the top makes the lamp, and gives me something to anchor the light to. Once the glue sets, I can use a little Tamiya putty to cap off the top and make everything smooth. Always test your circuits. Some styrene can be cut to size and glued in place for the walls. I think I want them to actually be brick walls, so a little bit of Tamiya putty and a knife adds a nice brick texture. There's definitely better ways to do this, but I thought of it after I'd already put the walls in place, so I made do. Then I can do the same thing for the asphalt, just this time I use a sanding stick to press some texture into the surface while it's not quite cured, rather than the knife. Some more styrene strips serve to cap off the wall. As always, start with a piece that's longer than you need and trim it down only once it's in place. Makes it much easier to manipulate. We're definitely going to need a mechanism to hold the battery in. I don't want to try and cram an actual button battery holder down here because it'll make the base too big. Instead, I think we can solder some wires directly to magnets and use the magnets themselves to hold the battery underneath. For this, we're first going to strip the wires, and for wires this small, it's honestly easier just to hit them with a torch and burn off the shielding, rather than trying to strip it. Now I hear you asking, how the heck do I solder magnets? Heating a magnet usually weakens its field horribly, so the trick is to mount the magnet on a bigger magnet first, and then solder the wire to the small one while it's held in place. The big magnet's magnetic field is strong enough to keep the small one aligned even while it's all heated up. One thing I did forget to do was buy non-magnetic soldering tips first, so this actually took me about 20 minutes to get the wires in place, because the iron kept sticking to the magnets and messing up my solder. Oops. But with the big magnet helping to keep the magnets' poles aligned while heated, I have plenty of retries, and I did get it eventually. And I was able to sink the magnets into the underside of the base, giving us a super easy way to snap a battery in, and turn the light on and off by just sliding it to the side a touch. Finally, let's give ourselves a little guy heading home after a long day, which we can do thanks to a nice N-scale figure. And then, we need a little friend to be watching him on his journey home. For this, I first mocked up the dome in Blender and then used that to sculpt a quick creature to print out. I didn't actually go too far on the details with him for a very specific reason. The N-scale figure is honestly kind of blobby, so having the figure be dramatically more crisp and detailed would have looked really odd. After gluing our new friend in place, we can take it all outside to prime. Then we can start building on some color, alternating cool and warm grays to build up the asphalt, then hitting the mortar in the wall with a lighter gray. Some browns on the bricks brings out the detail, and then a series of dry brush passes and grime washes weathers everything. We can pop the guy out from the background a bit with a red shirt and a gray jacket, and then carefully sketch in some street markings to enhance the scale. Then it's time to bring out the creature just a little bit with some reds and a little bit of Musso black in the void of its face. Then I can do a final highlight pass over it all. I think it needs one more little touch, maybe a street sign. After all, there's no way this guy doesn't know that thing is there, so why is he not looking at it? After I sketch out a quick design in Photoshop, I print it out on photo paper, trying a couple of different sizes at once so I can see what feels right. Then cut it out, glue it in place, and coat it with a thin layer of super glue to protect the ink. That then lets me go back over it with washes and paint without smearing the design. Finally, I can fill in this little spot in the back of the wall with some N-scale hedge from Kato. Maybe that's someone's yard? And knock back the greens a bit with some paint. They're a little intense right now. And with that, I think it's ready. It hadn't always been this way. There had been a time before they had come. Those first few weeks had been chaos. Who could have guessed that fighting back would only make things worse? That the worst thing to do was to simply look at them. We'd figured it out eventually. Created warning campaigns, set up agencies to monitor their movements, and broadcast warnings to the population. Signs to remind people unfortunate enough to run into them not to look, do anything but look. But by now the signs had grown faded, the warning broadcast tapes had worn thin. It was all ordinary, in a horrible sort of way. People didn't even bother sheltering during many of the incursions now, only keeping children and the elderly inside when the things came through, those who might not be able to resist that gnawing urge to look, to see the seemingly docile beings we shared our lives with. Docile. Until you looked. Hey, so that worked pretty well. These little bell jars are fantastic, and I seriously have like 20 of them. They were, I think, $1/4 a piece. So, if you enjoyed this, let me know, and maybe I can make some more like it. But I also have some other ideas, not quite diorama related, for things we can do with them. Stay tuned for that. I think we'll do some fun things in the future with this. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a lovely week. I'll see you next time, here on Witch Cove Crafts.